Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into what seems like a truly unprecedented event, something that really blurred the lines between, a standard military briefing and maybe more of a political spectacle. I'm talking about the summit President Donald J. Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth convened down at Quantico, Virginia.
Yeah, it was quite something.
The sources you shared, they detail this gathering, and it was explicitly called a culture war summit. I mean, think about that name.
Right.
And they summoned more than 800 senior U.S. and overseas military officers on short notice, too.
That scale,
Hmm.
it's just massive,
Right.
especially for operational leaders, people usually spread right across the globe commanding forces.
Exactly.
And, if we try to connect this to the bigger picture, what's really highly unusual here is that combination of scale and the format.
How so?
Well, typically, the top commanders, the sources mentioned, combatant commanders, flag officers, they get together maybe twice a year. But it's private for, critical strategy sessions.
Behind closed doors.
Precisely. This event, it was the polar opposite, a mass assembly, broadcast live. It wasn't framed as a secure planning meeting at all. It felt much more like a public political platform.
And the timing makes it even more striking, doesn't it? The sources point out there's just no modern precedent for a president and defense secretary ordering this kind of large-scale recall of their combat leadership.
None whatsoever.
Especially with a potential government shutdown looming in Washington, you'd think attention would be on budgets, readiness, immediate concerns.
Yeah, that lack of precedent really suggests the meeting's main purpose wasn't, standard strategy development. It points more towards a performative goal,
Performative.
designed to send a very public message, perhaps, about the military's direction under their leadership, rather than facilitating that kind of confidential strategic back and forth.
Okay, so let's maybe start with the logistics then, because those drew fire almost immediately. You gather 800 top military leaders.
Yeah.
Why should we, the listener, really care about how the meeting itself was organized, beyond just the agenda?
Well, this raises a really important question, actually, about resources and risk. First off, lawmakers, defense analysts, they immediately flagged the huge cost.
Right.
Flying in senior commanders from all over the world on short notice, that's a multi-million-dollar exercise. And it pulls funds, pulls attention away from readiness.
But okay, if the cost and the difficulty were that high, wouldn't that imply the agenda must have been, I don't know, existential or absolutely mission critical to justify it all?
You'd think so.
So what does it tell us that the agenda seemed to center so much on these internal cultural debates?
That's exactly the imbalance critics jumped on. And beyond just the cost, there's the professional operational worry putting that many top leaders in one single location. It introduces a massive security risk. It's unacceptable from a standard planning perspective. You never want your entire command chain in one place like that.
So the risk itself suggested to analysts that the really purpose might have been more about the drama, the optics, than anything else.
That's certainly how many read it, though logistical risk seemed secondary to the spectacle.
And the criticism hit that perceived purpose head on. We saw that quote from Corey Sheikh, the former Pentagon official,
Right.
saying the event looked like one more demonstration of Secretary Hegseth mistakenly believing our military leadership needs to be lectured into focusing on fighting wars.
That's a strong statement.
It sounds like a pretty profound indictment, suggesting he maybe doesn't trust his own command structure.
It does imply that, doesn't it? A sort of fundamental lack of faith in the existing professional military leadership, suggesting they need, public correction instead of private consultation.
Okay, so the event kicks off, and the real pivot point seems to have been Secretary Hegseth's opening address, a lengthy one, apparently.
He was.
And this is where it fully leans into that culture war summit name, focusing heavily on these internal cultural shifts within the military.
Yeah, Hegseth's message was very much one of internal reform. He wanted to restore what he was defining as a pure warrior ethos.
Warrior ethos, okay.
And that included, big emphasis on strict physical fitness standards, specific uniform rules, grooming rules. He even announced more restrictions on beards across the services.
And it wasn't just grooming, right? He pledged to eliminate what he called woke garbage.
Correct. That phrase was used.
And, crucially, he publicly defended dismissing over a dozen senior officers recently, a controversial move involving several women and people of color.
Yes, he addressed that directly.
And his justification. He said, quote, promotions will be based on merit, not on political correctness.
Well, analysts immediately noted that framing dismissals that way really politicizes what's normally a standard, albeit complex, personnel process.
How so?
It suggests the previous system was somehow compromised by political correctness. So this public defense really forced the whole topic of promotion diversity right into the middle of partisan debate.
Right, maybe sidelining the actual records or qualifications of the officers involved?
That was the concern raised, yeah. And then he also moved into operations, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Into the critical area of field operations. He apparently railed against what he called stupid rules of engagement,
Mm-hmm.
claiming they constrained troops on the battlefield. Now, this is a really sensitive area legally. We'll probably need to clarify this bit for the listener.
Absolutely. That distinction is vital. Rules of engagement, or ROE, those are specific orders for troops. They outline when, where, how they could use force for a particular mission in a particular place. They're tactical guidelines.
Okay, tactical.
But when Hegseth criticized them so broadly, critics warned he risked blurring the lines, potentially undermining the foundational laws of armed conflict, the LOAC.
And the LOAC is what exactly? The bigger picture.
That's the higher legal framework, yes.
Yeah.
It's based on international treaties, customary law, think Geneva Conventions. It sets the minimum legal boundaries for warfare itself.
Defining combatants, civilian protection. Exactly. Proportionality, necessity. So when a defense secretary publicly dismisses rules governing force, even if he means the tactical ROE, there's a danger it sends a message that those foundational legal principles, the LOAC, are somehow optional or negotiable.
Wow. That feels like a very dangerous signal to send in front of hundreds of commanders who have to operate under those international laws every single day.
It certainly raised eyebrows, according to the sources.
Okay, so Hegseth sets this internal cultural tone. Then President Trump takes the stage. And according to our sources, he moves the conversation squarely into domestic partisan politics.
Yeah, his speech was characteristically wide-ranging. He praised tariffs, he took shots at President Biden.
Standard political rally fare, maybe?
Perhaps, but the sources point out that delivering those kinds of partisan talking points right in front of combatant commanders who, by law and tradition, have to stay politically neutral, that immediately complicates things.
Well, think about their relationships with international allies. Those allies expect the U.S. military leadership to be apolitical, to represent the state, not a party. So it puts them in an awkward position, diplomatically and strategically.
And he also spent time on domestic military policy, didn't he? Which raises some pretty profound questions about the military's role here at home.
He did. He urged using U.S. cities, specifically named Los Angeles and Portland, Oregon, as, quote, training grounds for troops deployed domestically.
Training grounds in American cities.
That phrase immediately set off alarms among civil liberties groups and many defense analysts, too. The worry is about mission creep, you know?
Right.
And the potential violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which generally restricts using the military for domestic law enforcement.
So suggesting cities are training grounds.
Yeah.
It implies a much bigger, maybe non-traditional domestic role for active duty troops.
That's the concern, yeah. An expansion of their domestic mission set.
And the Pentagon renaming thing came up again, too.
Ah, yes, the Department of War.
He repeated he wants that name change, even though he doesn't have congressional approval for it. What's the significance of that push?
Well, while changing a name might seem just symbolic, moving from defense to war is actually a pretty powerful signal.
How so?
It's an attempt to redefine the whole perceived mission of the institution in the public eye, shifting the focus away from deterrence, diplomacy, maybe more towards proactive conflict. But again, that needs legislative action, which Congress hasn't provided.
Okay. And then there was that specific remark during his speech, the one that drew really immediate and intense backlash.
Right. While apparently mocking predecessors, he referred to the term nuclear.
Yes.
He called it the N-word and then added, there are two N-words, and you can't use either of them.
Wow.
Yeah. And according to the sources, that moment just instantly overshadowed a lot of the other policy discussion. Critics jumped on it, condemning that phrasing as racially insensitive.
And it highlights how the tone of a briefing for top military commanders got completely derailed by rhetoric that was, well, deeply political and controversial, far outside just defense policy.
Exactly. It shifted the focus dramatically.
So if we pull back, look at the bigger picture again. Maybe the most telling thing from that whole day was actually what didn't happen in the room. You've got 800 senior commanders there witnessing this highly political event. What was their reported response?
Silence. That's the word that comes through across all the sources, just silence.
Complete silence. response.
Military leaders largely stuck to their traditional restraint. The sources say Mr. Trump repeatedly tried to get applause or laughter, but they consistently resisted.
So he's performing for them, essentially.
And they're mandated by professional tradition, by U.S. law, really, to be apolitical. And it sounds like they just held that line. Stone-faced professionalism is how it was described.
That image, stone-faced silence broadcast live, that itself is an extraordinary kind of calculated non-response, isn't it?
It really is. And analysts interpreted that restraint as reflecting some deep professional concern about the growing politicization of the armed forces.
Especially given, as the sources note, Mr. Trump's recent history of using troops for politically sensitive things like immigration enforcement.
Right. So that silence, it was maybe the only tool they had available in that moment for professional dissent. Their presence was mandatory, right? They had to be there.
But their engagement wasn't.
Exactly. By refusing to sort of validate the political jokes or the partisan points in the speeches, they were perhaps trying to reinforce that constitutional tradition, an apolitical military leadership that serves the office, not the politician.
And the cost of that silent dissent wasn't ignored. You mentioned retired Major General Paul Eaton's quote.
Yeah, he praised the officers for their restraint, but then described the whole event as millions spent so Pete Hegseth could rant about facial hair and Donald Trump could recycle partisan gripes.
A very high price tag for what he saw as political theater.
Indeed. It really highlights this major friction point, doesn't it? Where the need for military professionalism just bumps right up against the demands of a political spectacle.
It sounds like the sources suggest the professional military felt its core function was being kind of subordinated to political messaging that day.
That seems to be a key takeaway, yeah.
Okay, so what does this all mean then? This deep dive, it really shows an unprecedented event, this mass gathering of top military leaders where the operational risks, the huge cost, were apparently seen as acceptable for a public stage.
Seems so.
A summit that blended these culture war criticisms with outright partisan rhetoric, and the result was just stark, calculated silence from the commanders forced to be the audience. A very visible clash between political communication and military professionalism.
And this raises, I think, an important question for you, the listener, to consider. We noted, right, that these senior officers usually meet privately in strategy sessions where you can have genuine debate, candid planning.
A real work.
Right. So when a presidential gathering is deliberately turned into this kind of mass live broadcast political spectacle, how does that mandatory silence that required restraint from the military leadership, how does that shift the whole dynamic of civil-military relations in a public forum? What quality of strategic advice, what kind of professional counsel maybe gets lost when a mandatory conversation becomes essentially a performance?
Something to think about. Keep digging into those sources, everyone, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.